The knock came late, when the autumn rain had turned the road to mud and sensible people were already at their fires. Rowan fell set down his ledger and listened. The knock came again, 3 measured raps, not frantic, but not the knock of someone with anywhere else to go. He pulled his coat from the peg and opened the door. She was tall enough that the doorframe caught her horns, and she stepped back by reflex, adjusting. 3 children stood behind her in the rain, a boy of about 10, a girl a little younger, and a small one so thoroughly soaked that Rowan could not make out the child's age at all, only 2 wide eyes, and a lower lip that was making a valiant effort not to tremble. The orc woman's traveling coat was dark with water. In the yard behind them, a wagon listed to one side, its near rear wheel cracked clean through the iron rim. "We only need until morning," the woman said. Her voice was even and quiet, not begging, statting. "The inn is full. I can pay for the floor." Rowan looked at the small one's lower lip, still fighting. "Come in," he said, and held the door. He had 4 rooms he didn't use. He had a kitchen that could feed 8 and lately fed 1. He had an entire shelf of his late wife's spare blankets, because Etta had believed in keeping enough blankets for a village, and for 2 years that shelf had stood undisturbed. He lit the kitchen fire higher and put the kettle on, and when he turned around, the 3 children were standing in a careful line just inside the door, dripping on his floorboards and clearly trying not to. "Sit down," he said, "all of you." The boy glanced at his mother. She gave him a small nod, and all 3 sat. Her name was Sura. She told him that while he made tea and found the shelf of blankets and came back to find that the small one, Pip, she said, not yet 3, had fallen asleep sitting upright on the bench with its head against the older girl's arm. The girl was Tilla, 8 years old and watching everything in the room with very attentive dark eyes. The boy was Bren, 10, and he had already identified that the fire needed another log and was looking at it without touching anything, waiting to be told he could help. "Add the log," Rowan said. Bren added it with great seriousness, and a little of the rain stiffness went out of his shoulders. Sura sat with her tea and looked at the shelves of grain ledgers that covered the far wall, floor to ceiling, and said nothing about them. Most people said something, usually that it was a great deal of paper. She only looked, the way a person looks at something they find interesting and are saving for later. "The wheel's cracked rim," Rowan said. "I can fix it in the morning. I've got the iron." She looked at him. "I told you I can pay for the floor." "I heard you," he said. The road washed out by morning. It happened sometimes in the autumn, when the creek to the north overran its bank and sent a sheet of water across the lower road. It would be impassable for 3 days, possibly 4. Rowan stood at the gate with Bren, who had come out to help carry the fixed iron from the shed, and was now studying the flooded road with the focused expression of someone doing arithmetic. 4 days, Bren said. "Maybe 5 if it rained again last night further up." "About right," Rowan said. Bren considered this. "We'll need to stay." "You will." The boy glanced at him. "Is that all right?" Rowan picked up the iron bar and started back toward the yard. "Come and hold the wheel steady," he said. Bren came. It took most of the morning to fix the rim properly, and Bren proved useful. He had good hands and he listened to instructions, and he asked questions that showed he was actually thinking about the answers. By midday the wheel was sound, the wagon stood level, and the 2 of them came in for the midday meal to find that Tilla had reorganized Rowan's kitchen shelves by size, and Sura had spread a long cloth across his table and was working through a leather satchel with the focused attention of a woman doing serious work. The satchel contained paper, a great deal of paper covered in tight, careful writing, small envelopes sealed and labeled, tiny glass bottles with stoppered corks, pressed samples mounted on cards. "Seeds," Rowan said. Sura looked up. A catalog, 47 varieties of frontier grain, some of them not commercially available this side of the Callow Range. "I have been building it for 9 years. Rowan sat down across the table from her. He had been a grain merchant for 31 years. He knew the Callow range. He knew what had not crossed it commercially in at least 15 years. He said slowly, "May I look?" She turned the catalog toward him. He read for a long time. Outside, Pip woke from a nap and toddled after him from room to room, having identified that this was a person who would not mind a small shadow. Rowan didn't mind. He read and turned pages, and Pip sat on the floor beside his chair and systematically examined a wooden button box that had sat on the side table since Etta left it there. And the house was quiet in the way that a house is quiet when it has people in it rather than when it is simply empty. "This variety," Rowan said, pointing. "The Fell Creek barleys haven't seen a clean strain of this in 8 years." "I know," Sura said. "That's why I carry it." He looked at her. She was watching him read the same way she had watched his shelves the night before, interested, measuring, not unfriendly. He turned back to the catalog. The entries were meticulous: planting depths, soil preferences, yield notes in wet years and dry ones, market prices from 6 different towns across 4 seasons. This was not a document assembled quickly or carelessly. This was a life's work, and it was immediately obvious to anyone who knew grain that it was irreplaceable. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Tallow Market eventually, then north." She paused. "We travel the loop every year. My husband started it. He was a seedman before I was." She said it plainly, the way you say things you have finished grieving over in private and have decided to carry like ordinary luggage. Rowan knew that weight. He had been carrying one very like it for 2 years. "You're welcome to stay until the road clears," he said. Sura looked at the ledger shelves, then at Pip, who had found a wooden button shaped like a star and was holding it up to the window light with both hands. "Thank you," she said. The 3 days became 5. The 5 became 10. It was not the flood that held them. The flood cleared on the 4th morning, as predicted. What held them was harder to name at first, a web of small things, accumulating. Bren discovered that Rowan's grain ledgers went back 22 years and asked if he could read them. Rowan said yes and brought him a stool. Tilla found a seed press among Etta's old things and asked, so carefully, if she could use it. Rowan said yes and showed her how to adjust the plates. Pip found that Felda was easier to say than the man, and said it often, following Rowan out to the yard in the mornings with small boots that were never properly laced because lacing them was still aspirational. And Sura began, without fanfare, to sort his inventory. It was chaos. He knew it was chaos. 31 years of grain trading had left his back storeroom in a state that made sense only to himself, and even to himself only imperfectly. Sura worked through it in the same way she worked through her catalog, methodically, with a head for patterns, with the patient certainty of someone who has organized complicated things before. She did not ask his permission before she began. She did tell him what she was doing and why, and she asked questions when she needed to, and she listened to his answers. 3 days in, the storeroom made a kind of sense it had not made since Etta was alive. "You should be charging a consultancy fee," he said. "I found 6 months' worth of spoilage you didn't know about in the back left corner," she said. "I am not charging a fee." "That's generous." "It's practical. I have nowhere else to be for a week." He laughed, the sudden, unguarded kind, the kind he had not heard from himself in some time. Sura looked at him with a mild expression, the corners of her mouth doing something carefully restrained. The letter from his daughter Myra arrived on the 12th day. She was coming for her autumn visit 3 days from the date of the letter, which meant tomorrow or the day after. She was coming, the letter said, because she worried about him alone in that house. He sat with the letter for a moment. Then he put it on the shelf with the others and went to help Bren with the evening grain count, because Bren had recently decided that he wanted to understand how a grain merchant tracked a season's inventory, and Rowan had discovered, somewhat to his surprise, that he liked teaching it. Myra arrived on the following afternoon and stood in the yard for a long moment, taking in the sound coming from the house. It was not the sound of an empty house. It was the sound of Tilla and Pip in the kitchen, and Bren's voice somewhere in the back asking about oat varietals, and her father's voice, unhurried, answering. She knocked. The door opened. Rowan stood there, a ledger under one arm, Pip riding his other hip with absolute comfort, tugging his collar with both fists in the manner of someone conducting navigation by fabric. Myra stared. "Come in," her father said and smiled. Not the careful, maintained smile she had seen on him for 2 years, the real one, the one from before. She came in. She met Sura in the kitchen, where Sura was writing in her catalog and had 3 cups of tea already made because, she explained, she had heard the horse in the yard and assumed a guest. She told Myra clearly who she was, how they had come, what the road had done, and how long they had stayed. She answered every question Myra had, including the unspoken ones, with a directness that Myra found, after the first surprised moment, quite restful. That evening the table held 6. Tilla ate with one hand and drew seed diagrams in her notebook with the other. Bren asked Myra about the city's grain exchange, because he had read about it in the ledger from 11 years ago and had questions. Pip ate approximately 30% of a bread roll and then fell asleep in the bowl. Myra watched her father lift Pip carefully from the bowl, wipe flour from its face, and carry it to the small bed that had been set up in the side room. She watched him come back to the table and sit down and pour more tea. She thought about the house as she had found it over the past 2 years, too quiet, too careful, her father at his ledgers like a man performing the actions of his life. She thought about the house as it was now. She caught Sura's eye. Sura looked back steadily, not asking for anything, not defending anything. Myra picked up her tea. "Will you stay through the winter?" she asked. Sura said, "I haven't asked him yet." After supper, when Bren and Tilla and the sleeping Pip were settled and Myra had taken the side bedroom, and the house was quiet again, Sura stood at the back door looking out at the first snow, which had begun in the last hour, soft and unhurried, covering the yard and the wagon and the good wheel he had fixed. Rowan came and stood beside her. For a while neither of them said anything. The snow fell. "My husband used to say that a place becomes home the first time you stop noticing you're a guest," Sura said. Her voice was quiet, the way it always was, but there was something under it that was not her usual carefulness. Rowan looked at the yard, at the wagon he had fixed, at the small boots drying by the door, at the light from Tilla's window where the girl had taken an extra candle to draw for another hour. "Did you notice?" he asked. Sura was quiet for a moment. "About 8 days ago," she said, "Pip brought me a button from your button box, the star one. She said she was keeping it safe for Felda." He did not say anything for a while. "Stay," he said, "all winter, longer if you like." Sura turned to look at him. The snow was still falling. The window behind them threw a warm square of light across the yard. "The catalog has never been sold from a fixed address," she said. "A merchant with a proper storeroom could carry half the eastern frontier on the right grain contracts. I've been thinking about it." "I have a proper storeroom," Rowan said. "It's organized now." She made the careful, restrained expression again, the one that was most of the way to a smile. "Yes," she said, "it is." They stood there while the snow fell and covered everything, and the house behind them held 4 people sleeping in rooms that had been empty for too long, and the boots by the door dried quietly in the warmth, and the button box on the side table was missing a star.